The rain had a sound in Paris that Lucas Reinhardt would never forget. A soft, steady whisper against the cobblestones, a rhythm that seemed to echo the heartbeat of the occupied city. To most, it was just weather. To him, it was a veil. Rain muffled footsteps, blurred faces, drowned questions. It made the perfect cover for a man who lived on secrets. He sat by the fogged window of Café Marchand, a small establishment tucked between the broken facades of Rue Saint-Honoré. Outside, German patrols passed like clockwork, their boots clicking against the stones, their rifles glinting under street lamps. Inside, the café breathed quietly, a pianist tapping out soft jazz on an out-of-tune piano, a waiter polishing glasses without a word, a handful of locals staring into their coffee as if it could warm away fear. Lucas looked like any other customer. Gray trench coat, a scarf tucked neatly under his collar, dark hair slicked back, face clean-shaven. Yet beneath that calm surface lived a storm. His eyes were cold, but not cruel. His movements deliberate, but not stiff. He had learned long ago that invisibility was not about hiding. It was about belonging just enough. He sipped his espresso slowly, scanning the reflections in the window. Every face in the glass was a potential threat, every motion a clue. A Gestapo officer at the counter, 2 French workers whispering in the corner, a woman walking past the café, her umbrella tilted to shield her from the drizzle. That woman, he noticed her first by the way she carried herself, upright and defiant, even under occupation. Her coat was worn, her shoes muddy, but her steps were purposeful. Claire Duval. He knew her name already. It was written in the dossier Berlin had handed him 6 months ago. A nurse at Hôtel Dieu, working with the underground resistance known as La Flamme. Her job, courier. She carried coded messages sewn into hems, baked into loaves of bread, hidden in the lining of medical crates. Dangerous work. His orders were clear. Infiltrate, gain her trust, identify her contacts, and deliver her to the Gestapo when the time was right. Lucas had done it before, in Warsaw, in Prague, in Amsterdam. It was the same pattern every time. Learn the habits, feed the lies, pull the strings. Yet, as he watched her disappear down the street, a faint unease stirred in his chest. It was unfamiliar, unwelcome. He told himself it was nothing. Emotion was a liability, and spies had no room for it. But when he rose to leave the café, he found himself looking once more at the door through which she'd vanished. That night, in his small apartment on Rue de Rivoli, Lucas reviewed her file again under the dim yellow light of a single bulb. Every page was clinical, efficient. Dates, reports, intercepted communications. She'd lost her brother early in the war, executed by the Germans for distributing pamphlets. Her mother had died in a bombing. Only she remained, a nurse by day, a courier by night. He studied her photograph, grainy, taken from a distance. Her expression was serious, her gaze slightly averted. Something about it unsettled him. He'd seen hundreds of faces in these files before, but never one that seemed so alive. He reminded himself that she was an enemy operative. The goal was information, not fascination. The next morning, Lucas donned his alias, Mathieu Rousseau, a translator for the German administrative office, born in Lyon, politically neutral, fluent in both French and German. His papers were flawless, his accent perfect. His every gesture was rehearsed. He began to frequent the hospital where she worked, pretending to deliver official documents and translation requests. It took 3 visits before she spoke to him. "Are you lost, Monsieur Rousseau?" she asked one afternoon, her tone polite but cool. She was standing beside a wounded resistance fighter disguised as a civilian laborer, her hands stained with iodine. "No," Lucas replied with a faint smile, "just trying not to get in the way." Her eyes studied him, sharp and cautious. Men who bring papers usually have more purpose than that. "I bring many things," he said lightly, "but purpose is not always one of them." It was a small exchange, insignificant to anyone watching. But to Lucas, it was a beginning. He left that day with the faint scent of antiseptic and perfume still lingering in his coat. Over the next few weeks, their paths crossed more often. Sometimes at the hospital, sometimes on the street, sometimes in the market near Rue Claire. She was careful never to linger near him too long, never to reveal more than necessary. Yet there was something in her eyes, curiosity, maybe even the faintest flicker of trust. Then, one afternoon, he saw her again at the market. She was arguing with a German officer over a loaf of bread, her voice sharp, fearless. "This is for my patients," she snapped in perfect German, "and if you think the Führer himself wants to explain to the Red Cross why your men are starving the hospitals, then by all means take it." The officer hesitated, muttered something about regulations, and walked away. Lucas couldn't help but smile. She didn't see him watching, but something inside him shifted. She was not just brave, she was impossible. That night, Lucas filed his routine report to Berlin. He mentioned her, briefly, as part of a list of potential contacts. But when he reached the section marked Assessment, Risk of Infiltration, he paused. His pencil hovered over the paper. High-value target, vulnerable through emotional manipulation. That was what he was supposed to write. Instead, he left it blank. Days turned into weeks. Each encounter chipped away at the distance between them. When he learned she volunteered at a shelter for orphans of war, he offered to translate German requisition forms to help them receive aid. She hesitated at first, but accepted. Small favors turned into conversations. Conversations turned into moments. And moments, dangerous, fragile moments, became something Lucas could no longer ignore. One evening, as they walked through the narrow back streets near the Seine, Claire stopped and looked at him with quiet suspicion. "You're not like the others," she said. "You don't sound like a bureaucrat. You don't even walk like one." Lucas smiled faintly, hiding the chill that ran through him. "Maybe I just walk like a man trying to survive." "Or like one hiding something," she countered softly. He didn't deny it. He simply looked at her, and, for a heartbeat, the world seemed to hold still. The river's murmur, the distant sound of boots, the glow of lamplight on wet stone. From that night on, Lucas knew the line he had been trained never to cross was already behind him. He began to lie to his superiors, not through omission, but through choice. Reports went missing. Code phrases changed meaning. He delayed orders, erased names, fabricated intelligence. Every act of defiance was a small rebellion against the machine that had made him what he was. But the truth of his situation was cruelly simple. He was a German spy in love with a French resistance courier. He was both hunter and protector, deceiver and savior. Each day he lived was a miracle balanced on the edge of discovery. And though Lucas had survived countless missions before, he understood, with a quiet certainty, that this one would end differently. For in the heart of occupied Paris, amid the whispers of betrayal and the scent of rain, a ghost had fallen in love, and that was the most dangerous thing a spy could ever do. By December 1942, Paris had become a city of whispers. Even the Seine seemed to flow more quietly, carrying with it the unspoken fears of millions. The occupation had settled into an uneasy rhythm, propaganda blaring from loudspeakers, Gestapo trucks rumbling through narrow streets, resistance messages scattered like ghosts on paper. The city had learned to breathe shallowly, to survive in silence. Lucas Reinhardt, still known to the world as Mathieu Rousseau, had learned to move through that silence like a shadow. He had become part of Paris, indistinguishable from its broken rhythm. His apartment was sparse and cold, his radio always hidden beneath the floorboards, his heart divided between the two worlds he no longer truly belonged to. Claire Duval entered that world like a candle in a cellar, small, fragile, but enough to make him remember what light looked like. They saw each other often now. Officially, he was her contact for translation work, someone with connections who could discreetly alter requisition forms or falsify signatures. Unofficially, he had become her confidant. Their meetings were dangerous, yet necessary. The Germans were tightening their grip, arresting anyone suspected of aiding the underground. Lucas knew that every word spoken to her, every glance exchanged, could be the one that betrayed them both. One night, they met in a small bookshop near Montparnasse, long closed to the public, but still run quietly by its aging owner. Lucas had arranged the meeting, claiming to have intercepted an administrative order that concerned her hospital. "You shouldn't have come," she whispered as she entered through the back door, shaking off her raincoat. "The patrols are everywhere tonight." "They won't bother a translator delivering documents," he said with a faint smile. "It's the one advantage of working for the enemy." "Is that what you tell yourself?" Her tone was teasing, but her eyes were serious. He handed her a folder, the edges smudged with ink. "New restrictions for medical supplies. They'll start rationing penicillin next week. Tell your doctor to hide what you have now." She opened the folder, frowning. "How did you get this?" "Trade secret." "Or treason," she murmured. He looked at her then, really looked. Maybe both. They stood in silence, the ticking of the wall clock filling the space between them. The air smelled of old paper and damp wood. Claire finally closed the folder and looked up. "Why are you helping us, Mathieu?" He could have lied easily. He had a dozen ready-made stories, hatred of the regime, family ties to the French, moral guilt. But instead, he said the first true thing that came to mind. "Because I can't stand watching you fight alone." Her expression softened, though she didn't let him see it fully. "Then don't just watch," she said quietly. "Do something that matters." It was a challenge and a promise. From that night on, Lucas began walking a line so thin it could have cut him in two. By day, he still sent coded transmissions to Berlin, filled with reports about the occupation, factory production, troop morale. But the sections concerning the resistance, the names, the movements, the meeting places, grew vague, deliberately incomplete. Sometimes he delayed his messages altogether. He risked everything for the luxury of omission. His superiors noticed, of course. Major Weber's voice crackled over the radio one evening. "Your transmissions are irregular, Nachtigall. Are you losing discipline?" "No, Herr Major," Lucas replied evenly. "Merely precision. The French are becoming cautious." "Then be more clever," Weber snapped. "You were sent to break them, not sympathize with them." When the transmission ended, Lucas sat in the dark, the hum of the radio filling the silence. For the first time in his career, he had lied, not to an enemy, but to his own command. And the strange part was, it didn't feel wrong. It felt like the first honest thing he'd done in years. Meanwhile, Claire's trust in him deepened. She began introducing him to others, carefully, discreetly, to members of La Flamme. He met a printer who forged identity cards, a priest who hid weapons beneath his church, a young courier who delivered coded letters through the sewers. Lucas memorized their faces, their voices, their habits, and then locked that knowledge away, never sending it to Berlin. Each secret he kept became another nail in the coffin of his old loyalty. One cold night, they found themselves walking along the river. Snowflakes drifted like ash in the lamplight. Claire spoke of her brother, the one she had lost in the first years of occupation. "They said he was executed," she murmured, staring into the dark water. "But no one ever found his body. Sometimes I still dream that he's alive." Lucas wanted to tell her the truth, that he had seen the lists, that her brother's name had been typed, stamped, recorded among the dead. But he couldn't. He couldn't be the one to take away the last piece of hope she had left. "If he was like you," he said softly, "then he didn't die quietly." She looked up at him then, her eyes glistening. "You speak like a soldier." "I used to be one," he said before he could stop himself. Her breath caught, but she didn't ask. Perhaps she already knew. That night, when Lucas returned to his apartment, he stood before the mirror for a long time. The man staring back at him was still wearing the face of Mathieu Rousseau, but beneath it, Lucas could see the fractures forming. He no longer knew where the lie ended and the truth began. In the weeks that followed, the Gestapo intensified its raids. 2 resistance couriers disappeared, and a weapons cache in Montmartre was discovered. Fear spread quickly. Claire became more withdrawn, her once bright spirit shadowed by exhaustion. Lucas noticed the tremor in her hands, the sleeplessness in her eyes. "Maybe you should stop for a while," he told her during one of their secret meetings in the hospital basement. "And leave the others to fight without me?" she said bitterly. "No, Mathieu, you wouldn't understand." "I understand better than you think," he murmured. Their eyes met, and in that charged silence, something unspoken passed between them, something neither could afford to name. She reached out, brushing his sleeve. The touch was fleeting, but it burned through him like a wound. After she left, Lucas sat alone among the crates of medical supplies, his pulse unsteady. For the first time since arriving in Paris, he understood the truth of his situation. He was no longer the hunter. He was the one ensnared. A few days later, a message arrived through his dead drop. A terse order from Major Weber. "Subject Duval is under investigation. Gather proof of resistance involvement. Terminate if necessary." Lucas stared at the words for a long time. Terminate if necessary. It was a phrase he had seen countless times before, cold and efficient. But now it felt like a blade pressed to his own throat. That night, he burned the message over the sink, watching the paper curl into ash. His reflection in the window looked like a ghost, a man already condemned. From that moment, his mission changed. He was no longer working for Berlin. He was working against it. Every code he sent became a subtle act of sabotage, every omission a quiet rebellion. And through it all, he saw Claire not as a target, not as a means to an end, but as a reason. Yet deep inside, Lucas knew what every spy eventually learns: no lie lasts forever. Sooner or later, the truth finds you. And when it did, it would not come as a whisper. It would come as gunfire. Winter had locked Paris in its grip by early 1943. The streets were draped in gray and silence. Smoke hung above the chimneys like the city's unspoken grief. The occupation no longer felt temporary. It was an infection, one that had seeped into every breath the city took. Lucas Reinhardt had stopped sending reports to Berlin entirely. Each day that passed without transmission was a small death sentence ticking louder in the background. He told himself it didn't matter anymore. He had already chosen his side, though it wasn't one the world would ever recognize. But in war, nothing stayed hidden forever. One evening, while walking along Rue Saint-André-des-Arts, Lucas felt the shift, the subtle vibration of danger, the instinct every spy learns to trust. 2 men followed him, moving just a heartbeat too deliberately. He turned a corner into a narrow alley and slipped through a butcher's back entrance, vanishing into the labyrinthine passages behind the old market. His pulse thudded cold in his ears. They were Gestapo, he was certain. By the time he reached his apartment, Lucas had already begun packing the essentials: forged IDs, cash,
coded notes, a small pistol. But when he reached for the radio hidden beneath the floorboards, his hand froze. Someone had touched it. The screws were misaligned, the dust disturbed.
They knew.
That night, Lucas didn't sleep. He sat by the window, smoking quietly as the fog crept in from the Seine. Across the river, the cathedral's silhouette loomed like a memory of faith. He thought of Claire, her steady hands, her defiance, the way her voice softened when she spoke to children in the hospital. He wanted to see her, to warn her, but he knew it would only draw attention. The Gestapo's net was tightening, and any contact could doom them both. For 3 days he lay low, changing safe houses, leaving false trails. He burned his identification as Mathieu Rousseau and created another, Pierre Laurent, railway clerk. But no alias could save him now. The walls were closing in. Then came the message that shattered what little calm he had left. Delivered through the same underground courier system he'd helped protect, it was written in Claire's hand. "Marcel is gone. They took him 2 nights ago. He talked. I don't know what he said. We're moving the rest tomorrow. If you can, don't come." Lucas felt the blood drain from his face. Marcel, the communications officer, the one who managed coded letters between the cells of La Flamme. He was brave, but no one could resist torture forever. Lucas knew what the Gestapo would have extracted: names, locations, habits, perhaps even his own. He went to her anyway. It was snowing when he arrived at the safe house, an abandoned bakery near Rue des Martyrs. Inside, candles flickered against the cracked walls, their light casting trembling shadows on faces filled with fear. Claire stood near the ovens, her hair damp, her expression grim. "Lucas! No, Matteo! You shouldn't be here," she said the moment she saw him. "Neither should you," he replied. "They know about Marcel. The network is compromised." Her jaw tightened. "We know. We're dispersing the group tonight. But someone else, someone new, must have betrayed us. They came too fast, too precise. It wasn't just Marcel." Lucas swallowed hard. He wanted to tell her the truth, that the betrayal had begun with him months ago, through the reports he'd sent before his silence. That even though he'd tried to protect her, his early intelligence had given Berlin the first threads they needed to start unraveling the flame. But how could he tell her that now? "Then we move faster," he said. "Where's your next safe house?" She hesitated, then handed him a folded map. "You'll take the children through the old sewer line. I'll go with the others to the river. We meet at dawn near the Pont Neuf." He nodded, though he knew he wouldn't be there. As the group began to move, Lucas found himself beside Claire again. She looked at him, really looked, as if searching for something in his eyes. "Tell me the truth," she whispered. "You were a soldier once, weren't you? A German." The words landed like a bullet. He didn't answer. He couldn't. Her expression hardened. "I knew it. I could hear it sometimes, in your voice, in the way you move." Her voice trembled. "Then why are you here? Why help us?" Finally, Lucas met her gaze. "Because I stopped believing in what I was fighting for." Claire took a step closer, her breath clouding between them. "And what do you believe in now?" "You." The silence that followed was unbearable. "You're lying," she said softly, but her voice lacked conviction. "Maybe," Lucas whispered, "but not about that." For a heartbeat, the world outside ceased to exist. Snow fell through the broken roof, landing in her hair. She looked up at him, eyes bright with unshed tears. Then, without another word, she turned away. "We leave in 5 minutes," she said. The escape was chaos. Boots echoed in the distance. Gunfire somewhere down the block. Lucas led 3 children through the narrow tunnels under the bakery, guiding them by candlelight until they reached the old sewer line. When they were safe, he doubled back. He couldn't leave Claire behind. He found her near the front entrance, shoving medical supplies into a satchel. "They're coming from the north," she said breathlessly. "We have maybe 5 minutes." Lucas took her shoulders. "Listen to me. If they find you, they'll kill you. You need to go, now." "And you?" "I'll hold them off." She shook her head violently. "You'll die." He smiled faintly. "Then I'll die as what I chose to be, a man, not a weapon." The words struck her harder than any confession could have. She stared at him, tears gathering at the corners of her eyes. "Was any of it real?" she asked. "All those meetings, the things you said?" He reached into his coat and pulled out a small envelope, sealed and worn. "This is everything I've written since the day we met. Reports I never sent, lies I never told. If you survive, read them. Then you'll know." Before she could respond, a shout rang out. "Halt! Hände hoch!" The Gestapo had arrived. Lucas grabbed Claire's hand and pulled her toward the back, but the door exploded inward under rifle fire. Splinters flew, smoke filled the room. He turned, firing twice. 2 soldiers dropped. Another bullet tore through his shoulder, spinning him back. "Go!" he roared. "Go, Claire!" She hesitated, screaming his name, but the resistance fighters dragged her toward the escape tunnel. The last thing she saw was Lucas, standing in the doorway, pistol raised, blood staining his coat. Outside, Major Weber's voice echoed through the night. "Reinhardt, drop your weapon!" The snow was crimson beneath Lucas's boots. He looked out into the street, his breath ragged. Weber stepped forward, pistol drawn. "You could have been a hero of the Reich," Weber said coldly. "You were the best of us." Lucas smiled weakly. "I was never yours, Weber." The last shot rang out like a tolling bell. And then, silence. The night Paris stopped breathing was the night Lucas Reinhardt was captured. When the smoke cleared from the shattered bakery, the air hung heavy with cordite and the bitter scent of burning bread. Snow drifted lazily through the broken rafters, settling on the still bodies of men who had died for ideals whispered in cellars. Beneath the dim, flickering lamplight, Lucas lay half-conscious, his body a mess of blood and dust. He should have died there. He almost did. But the Gestapo never wasted a useful corpse. When Lucas woke, he was in the basement of Avenue Foch, the headquarters of the German security police in occupied Paris. The walls were lined with hooks, chains, and stains that told their own silent stories. The light came from a single naked bulb, its hum like a mosquito trapped in glass. Major Weber stood before him, immaculate as ever, his black leather gloves spotless even in that pit of filth. His expression carried no anger, only a quiet, almost regretful precision. "You disappointed me, Reinhardt," Weber said, his voice low and measured. "You had a purpose. You were chosen because you believed in order, in loyalty. And now, look at you." Lucas tried to smile, but his lips were split. "Order? You call this order?" His voice was hoarse, almost gone. "Burning cities, killing children, making monsters out of men. That's not order, Weber. That's rot." Weber crouched, his shadow cutting across Lucas's face. "You think they'll remember you, the little nurse, the broken rebels? When this war is over, history will erase their names. Only the Reich endures." Lucas laughed, a dry, painful sound. "The Reich is already dying.
You just don't hear it yet.
Weber's jaw tightened. You always were sentimental. That's your flaw. He signaled to the guard. Bring him to the cell. Tomorrow we begin properly.
They dragged Lucas down a corridor lined with iron doors. He could hear muffled sobs, the creak of boots, the distant clink of keys. When they threw him into the cell, the stone floor met him like a blow. He didn't move for hours. But he wasn't alone. A whisper came from the darkness. "You're the German they caught, aren't you?" A voice, thin, trembling, female. He turned his head. In the far corner sat a woman, her face half lit by moonlight through a barred window. One of Claire's couriers. He remembered her from the hospital. The girl with the red scarf, Elise. "They took Claire," she said softly. "Yesterday morning, near the Pont Neuf." The words hit him harder than any beating could.
"She's alive?" he rasped.
Elise nodded. "For now. They don't know who she is. She used a false name. But they'll find out soon enough."
Lucas closed his eyes. The pain in his shoulder throbbed with every heartbeat. He had survived the front, the missions, the betrayals. But this was different. This was the slow death of knowing he'd failed to protect the only thing that mattered. That night, he didn't sleep. He prayed, not to God, but to memory. That Claire would live long enough to escape the city he'd helped damn.
By dawn, the interrogations began.
Weber didn't shout. He didn't threaten. He simply waited, a master of silence. Each question was a needle, each pause a weight pressing on Lucas's conscience.
Who is she?
No one. Where were they going?
I don't know. Why did you stop reporting?
Because I remembered I was human. Each answer earned him a blow, a dunk in cold water, another hour of pain. But Lucas had long since learned how to weaponize suffering by refusing to give it meaning. For 3 days they broke his body. They could not break his will. Meanwhile, beyond the city's shadow, Claire moved through the countryside with what remained of La Flamme. The group was smaller now, a handful of survivors hiding in barns, abandoned schools, and forests swallowed by winter. She had not cried since that night. She refused to. The ache was there, of course, buried beneath her ribs, but tears felt like betrayal. She wore Lucas's scarf now, gray, worn, blood-stained. It still smelled faintly of smoke and soap. One evening, she unfolded the envelope he'd given her before the raid. The paper was smudged, the ink blurred by time and heat, but the words were unmistakable. Lucas's handwriting, sharp and deliberate. "If you are reading this, it means I chose wrong once, and right too late. I was sent here to destroy, but instead I learned what it means to build, even if only for a heartbeat. You taught me that loyalty to a flag means nothing compared to loyalty to a soul. Whatever happens, know this. You made me remember what kind of man I could have been." Her hands trembled. The words blurred through her tears. The next day, the resistance learned of his fate. Lukas Reinhardt, codenamed Mathieu, executed by firing squad at dawn in the courtyard of Avenue Foch. No trial, no burial. The world didn't stop. The war rolled on. But something in Claire hardened that morning. She went back to Paris under a new name, with forged papers and a pistol hidden in her apron. She joined a network smuggling children and intelligence to the Free French forces. Every mission she carried out bore Lucas's ghost beside her, the memory of his voice, his laughter, his defiance. When the Allies finally liberated Paris in August 1944, the streets exploded in joy. Flags waved, bells rang, people kissed in the open. But Claire didn't join the celebrations. She walked quietly to the Place du Trocadero, where the Eiffel Tower rose against a sky of freedom. There, she lit a single candle. In her hand, she held the last page of Lucas's letter, the part she had never read aloud. They will never understand what we were. Enemies by design, bound by something purer than the flags that tried to claim us. I am not asking for forgiveness. I am asking you to live. Live for what I couldn't. That will be enough. She watched the flame flicker in the wind. Around her, the city roared with life, laughter, and the clatter of tanks rolling over cobblestone, the sound of victory. But for Claire, victory was quieter. It was the heartbeat she felt when she remembered him. And in that silence, Paris seemed to breathe again.